Willie O'Ree's remarkable journey began on the frozen ponds of Fredericton, where he honed the lightning speed and tenacity that would define his career. Despite facing racist taunts and hiding a near-blinding injury, his unwavering love for hockey fueled every stride he took on the ice. In 1958, he shattered the NHL's color barrier with the Boston Bruins, a milestone that forever changed the sport. Willie's quiet determination and fierce competitiveness became a beacon of hope for those who felt excluded from the rink. His story proves that passion, perseverance, and raw talent can triumph over prejudice. Join us as we explore the life and enduring legacy of this trailblazing icon in hockey history. Willie O'Ree was born on October 15, 1935, in Fredericton, a sleepy city in the eastern Canadian province of New Brunswick. He was the youngest of 13 children, living in a predominantly white community that was relatively open compared to many other parts of North America at the time. Willie's parents were both hard-working. His father often told him that, with determination and hard work, one could overcome any obstacle. That saying seemed to be ingrained in the young Willie's mind from his earliest days. Willie showed a great love of sports from an early age. He started skating at the age of 3, and was quickly drawn to hockey when he was old enough to hold his own stick. Fredericton had lakes and natural ice rinks where kids would gather to play in the winter. Willie practiced almost every chance he got, regardless of the cold or slippery weather. From the moments of diligently practicing dribbling the puck on the village pond, he gradually developed skillful ball control skills and the ability to accelerate, making his peers admire him. Perhaps one of the biggest motivations for Willie's passion for hockey was his special admiration for legends like Maurice Rocket, Richard, and Gordie Howe. Even as a child, Willie often watched matches on television or listened to radio reports to learn how to move, shoot, and not be afraid of collision. His love for this sport was so great that he was willing to wake up early to practice before going to school, or stay long after school to practice continuously shooting pucks into a makeshift goal behind his house. As the only person of color on most of the youth teams, Willie had to endure curious looks, sometimes harsh words from young opponents from other towns. However, his family was always by his side, cheering him on to keep believing in himself. His parents not only encouraged him mentally, but also regularly arranged time and limited money for him to have the conditions to participate in youth tournaments. They always reminded Willie that, regardless of skin color, true talent will be shown through the way he plays and respect for his teammates. On the ice, young O'Ree stood out with his extraordinary speed and calm playing style. His play relied heavily on his ability to accelerate, avoid rough tackles from opponents, and look for unexpected scoring opportunities. The coaches at the local youth team soon recognized Willie's special qualities, and he quickly became a mainstay on the team. Perseverance in training combined with innate instincts helped Willie make strong strides, catching the green eyes of scouts when he was quite young. It was his childhood years in Fredericton that forged Willie O'Ree's tough spirit and burning love for hockey. He learned to turn all the doubts and gossip into motivation to push forward. In the moments without the spotlight, without the attention of the press, Willie quietly stuck to the ice for hours every day. That intense desire was the premise for the history he was about to write when he became a pioneer to break the color barrier in the most prestigious league on the planet, the NHL. In those early days, Willie didn't stand out just because of his skin color. He was fast, blisteringly fast. Scouts would later talk about how he could streak down the ice, weaving through defenders as if he had eyes in the back of his head. But ironically, those eyes weren't always functioning at 100%. In a secret he kept for decades, Willie had suffered a hockey-related injury that left him almost completely blind in one eye. He never told team doctors, and he adapted his playing style to hide that weakness. Imagine the mental toughness it took, knowing that if he slipped up even once, it could cost him his entire career. That's the sort of pressure that forges champions, and Willie was determined to show the world that he belonged on that ice, no matter what. The Boston Bruins had noticed his speed and scoring potential, and the team was riddled with injuries on that cold January night in 1958. They needed fresh talent. This was the sliver of opportunity Willie needed. So, there he was, lacing up his skates in the locker room, surrounded by players who represented the sport's elite. It would have been understandable if he felt overwhelmed, but Willie was known for his calm demeanor and laser-focused determination. He'd traveled countless miles through minor league teams in Canada and the U.S., facing racial taunts in hostile arenas. Everything led to this moment. The sheer weight of it could have made any man buckle, but Willie told himself he was just going to play hockey because that's what he loved to do. As the game began, the roar of the crowd reached a crescendo, bouncing off every concrete wall in the old building. Facing the Montreal Canadiens, hockey royalty then and now, Willie O'Ree stepped onto the ice for the first shift of his NHL career. If you were to freeze that frame and examine the faces in the stands, you'd see pure excitement, curiosity, and perhaps a hint of disbelief. The tension was almost cinematic. The underdog Bruins hoping to topple the mighty Canadiens, and a young black forward trying to hold his own in a predominantly white league. Each pass, each check, each shot carried layers of meaning beyond the immediate action of a hockey game. Willie's presence on that ice challenged the status quo and forced everyone to question long-standing assumptions about race and sport. Even the opposing Canadiens players, many of them legends in their own right, felt the unspoken significance. They wanted to beat Boston, of course, but there was this added layer of awe, or at least guarded respect, for a man daring to stand where no black man had stood before. The media coverage, although not as intense or immediate as modern social media frenzy, soon realized what was happening. Reporters scrambled to file stories about the Jackie Robinson of hockey. Headlines popped up across North America, signaling a new day in a sport that prided itself on tradition, but often resisted change. Yet, Willie was never about showmanship or headlines. He was there to prove that he could compete. It's easy, decades later, to see Willie's debut as a neat historical milestone, but in real time, it was anything but neat. There were fans who hurled slurs, players who'd body check him extra hard to send a message, and an overall sense that he was going to have to fight for every inch of respect. Imagine stepping onto that ice knowing one wrong move could reinforce negative stereotypes, while one great play could inspire a generation. The psychological toll was immense. Willie, however, wore a quiet sense of pride. He'd once said that when people shouted hateful words at him, he would just dig deeper, skate harder, and try to put the puck in the net. He believed letting his play do the talking was more powerful than arguing with hecklers. And that's exactly what he did. Those early games were a showcase of raw speed, guts, and unwavering willpower. Still, if we look at the broader hockey landscape of the late 1950s, the game was dominated by big cities with storied teams: Montreal, Toronto, Boston, Detroit, Chicago, and New York. These were original franchises with lineups that had become household names. During that era, the style of play was gritty and physical. Coaching strategies often revolved around punishing forechecks, fewer penalties, and letting star players duke it out. Against this backdrop, Willie O'Ree's arrival wasn't just a personal triumph. It was a statement that hockey could, and should, evolve to include everyone who had the talent and determination to play. His presence also forced questions about the sport's accessibility. Up to that point, hockey had been perceived largely as a game for white communities, especially in Canada and parts of the northern United States. But Willie's journey proved that passion and skill could come from anywhere, and from anyone. Though his time in the NHL was relatively brief, what he represented reverberated through locker rooms, front offices, and youth leagues. Coaches began to see the potential in athletes they might have overlooked. Fans who had felt marginalized saw themselves reflected on the ice. It planted a seed that would take time to grow, but it was there, waiting for the right conditions to blossom. Of course, progress seldom comes without controversy. Some insisted that the NHL wasn't ready for a black player. Others dismissed the idea that this moment was truly historic, believing hockey would never be as diverse as other sports. Willie faced skepticism even in the media. Reporters often asked him how it felt to be black in a white league, focusing more on his race than his actual performance. But Willie refused to be pigeonholed. He answered with dignity and consistently brought the conversation back to his love of hockey and the thrill of competition. He didn't deny the significance of being a trailblazer, but he wanted people to know he was first and foremost a hockey player. That balancing act between personal identity and professional goals became a defining feature of his public image. For the Bruins franchise, having Willie O'Ree on the roster briefly made them front-page news in a new way. Historically overshadowed by Montreal in Stanley Cup success, Boston was forging its own identity. With Willie, they had a piece of history on their bench, even if he wasn't the star player who single-handedly turned the team into champions. It was bigger than that. The Bruins gave him a platform, and though they weren't openly championing civil rights as a cause, the very act of giving Willie a uniform spoke volumes. In hockey circles, it sparked debates about scouting practices, about whether there were other talented black players who deserved a shot, and about what it would mean to truly open the sport to a more diverse talent pool. One of the most remarkable aspects of Willie's story is that he managed these pressures while dealing with the secret of being legally blind in one eye, a circumstance that could have ended his career if the wrong people had found out. When he was accidentally struck by a puck years earlier, the impact shattered the retina, leaving him with extremely limited vision on one side. But Willie adjusted his play, compensating with heightened awareness and quick reflexes. His coaches and teammates might have wondered why he sometimes didn't see passes coming from a certain angle, but he soldiered on without revealing the full truth. Looking back, this part of his story adds another layer of awe to his achievements. It wasn't just one barrier he broke, it was two. Willie's time in the NHL lasted parts of 2 seasons. In total, he played 45 games, scored a handful of goals, and delivered several assists. On paper, those numbers won't stand out among hockey's all-time greats, but statistics alone can't measure the ripple effect of a barrier shattered. After leaving the NHL, Willie continued to play in minor leagues for years, never losing that fire for the sport. He eventually retired and found himself at a crossroads, wondering if his impact had truly resonated. As the civil rights movement swelled in the 1960s and 1970s, the significance of his entry into the NHL grew clearer. He became a quiet symbol of what was possible, even if mainstream hockey circles didn't always acknowledge him with the fanfare he deserved. Over time, though, the legacy of Willie O'Ree gained the recognition it merited. Young black players began citing him as an inspiration. Grant Fuhr, Jerome Iginla, P.K. Subban, and many others who would make their own marks in the NHL. They all stood on the foundation Willie had laid. In truth, the NHL moved forward slowly, but it did move forward. More players of diverse backgrounds began to appear, each challenging stereotypes and broadening the fan base. When Willie was finally inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 2018, it was a moment of profound validation, not just for him, but for every kid who ever felt shut out of the sport he cherished. It was as if the hockey world collectively said, "Yes, we recognize what you did and how you did it, even in the face of adversity." Now, when people discuss the greatest moments or rivalries in sports history, Willie O'Ree's story might not always be the first to come up. Hockey fans often recall epic Stanley Cup battles, legendary goals, and the dynasties that reigned supreme. But if we're talking about cultural impact, about a single player stepping over an invisible line that wasn't supposed to be crossed, Willie's debut stands tall among the most significant events in the game. It resonates as a triumph of grit over prejudice, a testament to the power of one individual's unrelenting drive, and a reminder that courage often appears in unassuming forms. Of course, there were those who claimed the NHL's color barrier was simply a product of geography, that hockey was predominantly a northern Canadian game without the same racial demographics as American baseball or basketball. They say that had nothing to do with prejudice. But talk to Willie O'Ree and you get a different picture. He remembers the slurs, the nightmarish road trips in the minor leagues, the times his own teammates doubted him. He remembers fans throwing garbage, spitting at him, or telling him to go back to baseball because that's what they believed the people of color should be playing. And yet, through it all, he kept lacing up those skates. He turned that hatred into fuel. Today, the NHL has diversity programs and makes efforts, imperfect though they may be, to spread hockey's reach. You'll see young players of all backgrounds joining youth leagues, especially as technology and social media connect communities in new ways. Organizations invite Willie to speak, to remind everyone that progress is not guaranteed. You have to work for it. His voice, full of humility and wisdom, continues to inspire the next generation of athletes. When he looks back on his career, Willie often expresses gratitude for the chance to play, for the people who supported him, and for the progress the sport has seen. But he's never shied away from acknowledging there's still work to be done. There are still incidents of racial abuse in arenas, there are still barriers, financial, cultural, and geographic, that prevent certain communities from embracing hockey. Yet, the lasting impact of Willie's NHL debut is a beacon of possibility. It reminds us that what seems impossible can be done, and that the first step, though the hardest, can open the door for countless others. Whether you're a casual sports fan or a devoted student of hockey history, Willie O'Ree's story stands as one of those rare moments that transcend the scoreboard. It speaks to the power of dreams, the realities of prejudice, and the hope we invest in pioneers who dare to challenge the norm. Watching old footage of Willie darting across the ice, you can almost feel his determination radiating off the screen. It's that intangible spark that makes sports so compelling. The knowledge that one person can reshape an entire narrative, not just for themselves, but for everyone who follows. So, was Willie O'Ree's first NHL game the greatest hockey moment of all time? That might depend on who you ask. But what is undeniable is that few events carry such a profound cultural and social weight. If you've ever felt excluded, if you've ever had to fight for your place at the table or on the ice, his story resonates in a way that transcends final scores and stat sheets. It's a testament to how a single moment, a single player, can break down walls that once seemed unbreachable. As you reflect on this narrative, on the roar of the Boston Garden, the crack of the puck against the boards, the swift glide of a young man's skates carving up the ice, ask yourself, do we give enough credit to those who dare to be the first? Let's keep this conversation alive. Share Willie O'Ree's story with a friend who's never heard it. Think about how his journey parallels your own challenges, however different they might be, and tell us, do you believe this was one of the greatest milestones in hockey or even sports history? Sound off in the comments below. Let the world know where you stand on this remarkable chapter of triumph and change, and join in celebrating a legend whose courage opened the rink doors a little wider for everyone.